So today we're going to be taking a look at the Skull Man, and not to be confused with Skull Man from Mega Man. So this is one anime I've actually never heard of whatsoever. So like always, this could really go either way. But one thing that is interesting to know before I talk about the story is that the Skull Man is based after a manga that was made all the way back in 1970. And since because the show came out in 2007, meaning that it took 37 years to get an anime adaptation. Of course, it was not in development for that long, I just found it interesting. But one last thing I will mention is that, unfortunately, this one might be a short one because there's not a whole lot I can say about the plot because this one may seem pretty simple, but there is a lot of stuff here that I would like to talk about, but it would go into spoiler territory and I just don't want to do that. So here it goes. So it begins with our main character, Hayato, and he works for a newspaper company in Tokyo. So there's been some strange incidents happening where there's a guy dressed up as a skeleton man killing people. And oddly enough, this is all being happened in his old city that he grew up in, which is Otome City. So he wants to go back to his old town for many reasons. One, for the nostalgia factor, and two, because he's really interested in the Skull Man theory. So he ends up taking the train to his old city, but as he was going to the bathroom, he ended up getting locked in there with some other girl. And that happened to be Kiriko. So she's an aspiring photographer who wanted to go back to the old city, but the thing is, she doesn't have a pass with her, so she ended up going inside the bathroom so the police don't check them. So that's how those two got introduced. So after leaving the station and he ends up going back to his old apartment, him and Kiriko always have like a whole bunch of arguments with each other. But after that event, he ends up getting seen by the Skull Man himself. But he ends up surviving, but he ends up passing out at the scene of the crime. So when he wakes up in the police station, everyone thinks that he was the one that killed him, and of course no one believes about the whole Skull Man theory. But they end up letting him go because there is no proof. Also, the character Shinjo is a police officer who's kind of an asshole. So because of all this shit happening, Kiriko wants to help Hayato out. Hayato out? Ugh, I can't say that together. So anyways, basically, they're all trying to figure out who the Skull Man is and what's his reasoning for killing people, and at the same time, Hayato wants to meet up with one of his childhood friends, which happens to be a priest, and also meets other people that he knew in his childhood with this whole mystery going on. So that's all I have to say about the story here. Like I said, there's a lot more to it, but I'm not going to get into too much detail here. So it is a pretty easy story to understand, especially for a mystery. So now let's move on and start talking about the other things, like the animation. And the animation here is really interesting. It has a mix between classic style and modern. So the thing that reminds me of an older anime is the character designs. They just have that 70s look to them, which does make sense since the show is based after a 70s manga, and I do think they do look really nice. But the thing that reminds me of more of a modern look is not only the backgrounds, but also the show does have some 3D effects, although they are mostly used on the vehicles. And they really do stand out quite a lot, but it's not the worst looking 3D I've ever seen. I mean, this definitely does look better than some of the other earlier ones that I've done. But for the most part though, I do like the animation. I think it's a quite interesting look to it that's very distinct. And that's something you really don't see that much, so I gotta give them some credit there. But for the most part though, I do think it is a pretty nice looking one. And as for the show's music, if I say so myself, I think it's actually pretty awesome. So all the songs fit the tone really well. Like whenever something is dark, something is mysterious, something is sad or happy, everything just sounds really good, and it also does have some good variety of music. So I really don't have any complaints there. But as for the opening theme song, however, is just kind of alright. Like, the song itself isn't bad, in fact I actually do kind of like it, it's just the only thing about it that I don't like is the singing in it. I don't know, I just don't like the dude's voice, but that's just my opinion on that. But even if I don't like the vocals in it much, at least the song is still pretty good. And now, as for the voice acting, this show only has Japanese voice acting, it never got an English release, so because of that, I really can't say much here because, you know, I don't speak Japanese, so therefore I can't judge the quality. So, did you guys miss me saying that? Because I remember I used to say that a shit ton before, but yeah, I haven't said that in a while. So yeah, nothing much to say, and damn, we're already at the overall thoughts. So now, if I were to rate this one, I think I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. I think this was a really good show. So I really like the characters in this show, especially the two main ones. There's a lot of really good interactions between them, and some good character development, of course. And also, I have to mention this, but the Skull Man himself just looks fucking badass. but the overall story was actually quite good. And for a mystery, even though the show was a little bit slow paced at times, I think it did work really well, because the more I watched it, the more interested I became. But one thing I will say without giving away much detail is that the ending for this show has a pretty cool plot twist that I was not suspecting whatsoever. And because this show is 13 episodes long, I think it's a perfect length, because this is one I can definitely recommend. It's good, interesting, and pretty short. And also, I would personally consider this to be a pretty underrated show, considering I never really hear anybody talk about it. And even when the show first came out, I was pretty active on watching some random ass animes, and even back then, I still never even heard about it. So unfortunately, I don't think this one was that popular when it came out, which is a damn shame, because I would consider this to be a sleeper hit. So like I said, I would recommend it if you do want to watch a pretty interesting mystery anime that also has a badass looking character in it. Also, one last thing to mention, just for shits and giggles, is that the Skullman character was also in Kamen Rider W, and his name was Kamen Rider Skull. So that's pretty awesome to know. So yeah, the Skullman anime is actually a pretty enjoyable one that I would consider it to be a favorite of mine.